Want to know how to protect your personal brand. I just got off of an awesome conversation with a friend of mine, Autumn Witt Boyd, who is the founder and owner of AWB Law Firm, which is kind of a unique law firm in the personal brand space. She really caters to people who have personal brands, courses, books, keynotes, podcasts, but anyone who would consider themselves a content creator. So if you're listening to this going, oh, I don't know if I'm a content creator, I'm an entrepreneur or a small business owner. If you have a methodology or a framework to your business, this applies to you. You are a content creator. If you have a robust website or blogs, or you put out a bunch of free content, guess what? You're a content creator, even if you don't think you are. And so we had this amazing conversation on the Influential Personal Brand podcast, and I thought it was worthy enough to recap it in a shorter conversation of just how do you protect your personal brand? And one of the first things that we should really consider is how do we do that in a proactive manner, right? So there's things to do on the back end. Those are always more time consuming and more expensive. So, what are some of the things that we can do as we're getting started or even before we get started to protect our personal brands? So, a couple of quick things that I thought were just worthwhile to share with you guys. Number one, make sure that you're starting from a clean slate, right? So, if you're in the very beginning phases of your business and you haven't come up with even a name for your business or your personal brand or a title for a book, a keynote, a course, a curriculum, a framework, a methodology, whatever it is, right? This is the best place to start is make sure that you're starting on, solid ground and there's nothing else in the marketplace that's already being actively used, right? And there's some nuance to that, but I just thought this was a good, healthy checklist is as you're coming up with the name or the title for your things, right? So again, those are a variety of things, right? Could be company name, brand name, um, book title, course title, keynote title, podcast title. Just think titles, right? Names, brands, right? Brands have names. So these are some things you want to just do to make sure you're just clean slate. Don't need to worry about anything later. Because I know from experience, once you get attached to something, there is emotional involvement. And it also feels like starting over, even though you're not, if you have to come up with a new name for something. So let's just make sure that the name you're coming up with is one that's going to last the test of time because it's not in use somewhere else. Okay. That's the first thing is start with the U.S. Office of Patents and Trademarks, right? Make sure that no one else already has this in use or has an active trademark. Perhaps it's expired or whatever, but just make sure that that's a first round filter as you're kind of going through what we call the title tests. This is what we call the availability test, right? So if you're a part of the Brand Builders Group community, we talk about this in Finding Your Brand DNA, which we did trademark. So on that note, this is one of the 5 title tests. And one of the things is going, is it available? Don't take something that's not available. So that's the first round filter. Is it trademark, right? Is it already active and in use by someone else with a legal trademark? Number 2, do a thorough Google search, right? These are DIY things. You don't have to have an attorney to do these things, which means it costs your time, but it's saving you dollars. So do a thorough Google search. What do I mean by thorough? Go at least to pages 5, 6, 7 on Google to see if anything pops up. And for all intents and purposes, screenshot all of the work so that you have proof. Make sure that when you're screenshotting things, it shows the date on your calendar of like, hey, on this date, right? Screenshots also share dates. Don't delete that, right? Label it with the date. But it's better if it can show your calendar for proof. But those are really important. Same thing with the U.S. Office of Patent and Trademarks. Whatever you can do to have proof that on this date, this is what I took, this is my proof, my documentation. Same thing with Google. Because today it might not be there, but a week from now it might, right? So it's always good when you came up with something to make sure that you're just taking the one extra step of documentation for proof and just want to put those in your archive files, save them for a rainy day. Hopefully you'll never need them. Third thing is check social media platforms for that title, right? So, I use the brand title Better Than Ever. So I'll just use that, right? Not in use on anything with Google. It was not trademarked. It was, there's no podcast. There's no books. There's all the things, right? So that would be the next thing. Do an Amazon search and just see if it's in use. One of the things that we talk about on the podcast interview with Autumn Whit Boyd is just because it's a book title does not mean you can't use it. Doesn't mean you should, but you cannot trademark a book title by itself. You have to have an entire series of things for it to actually get trademarked. So it cannot just be a book title. So if you have a book title and a keynote title and a course title, all with the same title, now that's a brand. But a book is not a brand. So you cannot trademark a book title. So just because it pops up doesn't mean you can't use it. It just doesn't mean you should, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should always. So you just want to go and do the due diligence, right? If it was an Amazon book that was released 10 years ago and 5 people bought it and there's no reviews, but just use your common sense knowledge there of like what you should and shouldn't do. But those are things that you want to check, right? So check for book titles just to go like, if you find it there, then pull up the website, right? Is it in use? Is there anything else in there? Even if they don't have a trademark, is it in use elsewhere? Because you don't want to be competing about what someone else already has claim over. There's enough ideas and enough other titles that we can come up with. So those are just things to pay attention to. Next one is do a podcast search, right? So go through the iTunes library or wherever you listen to your podcast and do some title searches and go, hey, is this title being used here? Right. So you want to be doing, clearly the US patent and trademark search. You want to do Amazon search, a good thorough 5 to 6 page deep Google search, do a podcast search, and then, the social media, right? And then do it for anything that would be on handles on the primary platforms that you would be using, right? So if you're going to have a YouTube channel, make sure it's not in use on anyone else's, right? Make sure this isn't someone's handle on Instagram, or make sure this isn't a title actively in use on LinkedIn. So those are some of the key places that will just help you make sure that when you come up with something, before you get emotionally invested in it, do these availability tests and make sure that it's available, because starting with a clean slate is one of the most important things you can do to have a good, secure brand. And then it also gives you proof when you do all this documentation that you were first in use, right? So there is this idea of there is a race to use. In other words, there is a race to who's going to use it first. Be the first. And if you're going to do it, then last but not least, take the necessary steps to get what you can trademarked or copyright, right? That doesn't mean everything needs to be, but if you're going to have an entire brand built around something, take the few $100s or a couple $1,000s even and protect that. If that's going to be something that is going to make you money, it's going to stand the test of time. In other words, you're going to be using it for a while and you have an emotional investment in it, then it is worth the time and the money, because it's going to take time to do it and some money. But if this is your business title, your brand title, it is worth it. So once you find that it is clear, it's available, it's in use, take that next step, do the due diligence, get an attorney, and file your trademark and protect your brand, right? The more you do it on the front end, the less expensive it's going to be later on. So how do you protect your brand? Make sure it's really yours, and then take the next step to legally protect it, to make sure that you get to keep that brand and nobody else can take it from you.